you. First of all, I'd just like to welcome everyone to this 2026 budget engagement session. And just to recognize also that we're meeting here on the unceded traditional ancestral territory of the Anzac people. And I'm going to turn it over to CAO Mombercat for the presentation.
Thank you, Mayor O'Connor. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Lisa, if you could bring the presentation up for me, please. Thank you. So just a quick agenda of what we're going to do. We're going to quickly run through the budget timeline. We're going to talk a little bit about Budget 101, just some of the principles behind municipal budgeting. We'll look at the 2026 core budget, the revenues and the expenses. We'll talk a little bit about the 5-year financial plan, look at the property taxes, just some examples of how those are calculated, and then we can take any questions at the end of the presentation. So the budget timeline for 2026 includes a number of steps. Some of them have already occurred. On February the 10th, we received our budget direction from Council. And on February 25th, which is today, we're doing our community engagement session. Following this, we'll have an online open period from the 25th tonight until March the 14th, where we welcome any questions or feedback from the public. On March the 24th, we'll bring to Council a draft 5-year financial plan. And then on April the 7th, we'll have the first 3 readings of that financial plan. On April the 21st, we'll hopefully adopt that financial plan, and we'll do the first 3 readings of the tax rates bylaw for 2026. And then on May the 12th, we'll adopt the 2026 tax rate bylaw. I believe you're all aware we're required to adopt our tax rate bylaw before May the 15th. So that means by May 14th. And in addition to that, we have to adopt the 5-year financial plan prior to the tax rate bylaw. So just a little bit about how the budget is developed. It's developed by staff, based on discussions with Council and priorities that Council has identified for the upcoming year. You present it, as we're doing tonight, to the community for any feedback or input on the budget. Then Council will approve the draft budget, incorporating any of the input that has been received. And then, just the budget typically includes any special projects or capital expenditures that we have. So for the 2026 year, we really only have one special project, which is the completion of the OCP, which is well underway. The capital projects aren't part of this budget because they're all related to special grants or recovery funding. So, a couple other just points on this, municipality cannot run a deficit. So when we look at our budget, our revenues must equal our expenditures, or we require a transfer from a reserve fund to supplement any shortfall. Our reserves, as they've been established, we have a number of different reserves. They can be established either for a specific reason, like we have a capital assets reserve that's used for purchase of future capital assets, or it can be a general reserve, such as just a general operating reserve. And we have one of those too. So we have a number of reserves for different purposes, but the one that really comes into play with this one is just our general operating reserve. Looking at the revenue, just over the next 5 years, we've been talking about this over the last several years. 2026 is the kind of official end of our recovery funding that we have been receiving from municipal affairs. And then we will return to kind of more standard levels of revenue for the village. So in 2026, the budget right now is revenue of $2,553,000. And then in 2027, that will drop to 1.6 million and then kind of hover around that level for the foreseeable future. Prior to the fire, Lytton operated on a $1.4 million budget. And that budget would have been made up of property taxes collected, but then also a series of grants and contributions from different provincial departments and different agencies to help, make the operations work. In this budget, we have, kind of a core revenue of 2.5 million. That includes 1 million of funding from municipal affairs. So really, we're talking right now about a budget of 1.5 million if you look at, kind of the standard expenses. When I use the word core, what I'm talking about there is really kind of core municipal operations. So none of the extraneous recovery expenses are included in this budget. This is just our day-to-day municipal operation. And just a breakout of where that revenue comes from, because $1 million of it is coming from municipal affairs, we have a very large portion of it is government transfers. We have the sales services, so that's everything from fire protection agreements to water and sewer services or cemetery fees, all those types of things that we services we provide that we bill for. We have investment income budgeted of $250,000 and property taxes of $470,000. So in terms of the government grants and transfers, the $924,550 from the Municipal Affairs Recovery Grant. We've got a small communities grant that we receive every year. It's budgeted at $408,000, which is the amount we received in 2025. We've got $118,000 in the budget for the OCP. That's money that had been received prior and had been put away in a reserve until we started that process. So some of that money was spent in 2025. The rest of it is spent in 2026. I have on my slide 2025, sorry, wrong year. Get them mixed up when you're kind of going back and forth. And then we have $40,000 budgeted for emergency management planning with the local Lytton communities. And so that's a grant that has been received from EMCR for that purpose.
Back to that other slide for a second.
Certainly.
And I don't know if I heard you say that, but the first bullet,
Yes.
that be 1,000? 900?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Thank
I'm
you.
sorry. Yeah, not 924 million. You're right.
So look at it a few times. Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Yes, 924,000.
Thank you.
All right, you can keep going, Lisa.
All right.
The property tax revenue budgeted for 2026 of $470,584. This comes from a combination of our preliminary tax roll, which we've received from BC Assessment. Final tax roll will be received at the end of March. The preliminary roll shows an overall increase in values in the Village of Lytton of 31%. 23% of that is related to new construction. So the increase in assessments on existing properties was around 7.8% year over year. We've got 44 million in assessment in 2026 compared to 33.4 million in 2025. And right now we're budgeting for a property tax rate increase of 14%. And this is just a comparison for interest sake. This is looks at the Village of Lytton tax rate in 2025 compared to the tax rates in the surrounding communities for the same year. So don't know what their 2026 rates will look like, but just as a point of interest, if you look at the residential rates, Lytton's rate was 2.6298. And, the next closest to us would be Ashcroft at 3.1291. So our tax rate on residential property is quite a bit lower than the communities that are in the surrounding area. But then when you look at other things like the major industry rate, ours is much higher than some of the other communities. But again, our commercial rate is quite a bit lower than other communities. And the utilities, we've talked about this before, that rate is capped at 40 based on some provincial legislation. So you can see most of the communities target rate to be at the 40 rate. So. And then, of course, the other piece of the pie is the water and wastewater budgets. So, both of those, we have fees charged every quarter to the residents for connection and use of those services. We've got both of those are budgeted at $109,750 for the current year. Those we'll continue to talk about those rates and whether or not that's an appropriate amount, but that's based on our current annual charge and the number of connections that are anticipated. That rate will continue to rise, and then depending on the pace of building and number of connections to the system, that will all flush out over the next several years. Then on the expense side of things, it's just a breakdown of the expenses. We have a very large category that's called general government. That includes council, finance, corporate and admin, those types of functions. We have our utilities, our water and wastewater departments, $422,000 in expenses. Parks and Rec at this point is culture is a very small number because we're not doing a lot of things in that area, but that's primarily just some materials to maintain our parks as they are today. Public Works at 232,000, Planning and Development at 251,000, and Protective Services at 163. So that's really fire and business building inspections, that type of thing. So these numbers, pretty much every one of them, maybe with the exception of Parks and Rec, include expenditures that are covered specifically by that 924 that's provided from municipal affairs. So the budget is broken out into two kind of categories based on where the funding comes from. Just a quick couple of comments on the 5-year financial plan. So, we're required to prepare a 5-year financial plan that balances to zero in each one of the years. So, as I said, that will come forward in draft form at the end of March. The future year's revenues and expenses are, basically increased to reflect inflation if they're, if all other things being equal. This is one of the areas that we've been talking quite a bit about, because looking at how some of the new facilities will impact the budgets, particularly probably 2028 and beyond. There'll be some impact in 2027. In 2026, the only new facility is the Public Works building. So, as we have information, we will be incorporating it into this. Council can amend this financial plan anytime they want. So, I think we'll prepare it initially with the information we have, and we'll continue to bring information forward and put those numbers in as we get them. Any kind of an operating deficit in the future, again, just has to be covered by either growth in taxes or fees or a transfer from the reserve. The property taxes, again, the values in Lytton are 30% overall, with the new construction being 23% of that, and the existing properties being 7.8%. We'll wait for the final roll to determine if those numbers are still the increases. Past few years, we've had no appeals, and so our preliminary roll and final roll have been the same. Certainly makes it a lot easier for preparing the budget because you don't have to rework everything, but we'll wait until we get those final numbers to determine. Just an example of what the situation would be if you were a resident in Lytton owning a property in 25 and 2026, and you had that increase in value as well as an increase in the rate. So in 2025, the average assessed value in Lytton was $293,245. So at the 2025 tax rate of 2.6298, that would have meant municipal taxes of $771. In 2026, the draft tax rate at this point is 3%, and the average assessed value has gone up to $362,591. So the resulting taxes in 2026 would be $1,087. So just to demonstrate, that shows you how both the increase in assessment and the increase in rate both play into it, and how it changes the amount of taxes that our residents will have to pay. And then, of course, in addition, this is just municipal taxes. I think the next slide maybe talks to so we collect taxes on behalf of all of these agencies. So the TNRD, the Thompson Regional Hospital District, Police, School, Municipal Finance Authority, and the BC Assessment Authority. So those organizations all give us the amounts that they want us to collect, and we have to levy that on top of our own taxes. And in the last couple of years, those taxes have equaled at least what our taxes were. So if I'd say the municipal taxes are $771, that means the total tax bill will be twice that amount, just in terms of, just for reference. And that's pretty much it. So I don't know if anybody has any questions on that or wants to any further clarification.
When we were looking at revenue sources, it says investment income, 250,000. And that is based on
the investment income. The reason why we have that even at this time is because we still are in possession of a lot of grant revenue that was paid to us up front, And so it's in our bank account. And so that's just an estimate of what that number would be. It's kind of hard to tell what it's going to be because the rates are always fluctuating on the interest rate applicable to that. And I don't really want to over budget that number. I'd rather be conservative on it and find out we have more than we expected.
So when you talk about reserves, because you talked about reserves too, then I'm just trying to figure out, so if once every now and again we draw out of a reserve, for example, perhaps we draw out of a reserve to balance its budget.
Yes,
So the money that's sitting in a reserve is collecting interest, correct?
correct.
And so when you draw down out of that, now you're going to affect the interest you're going to get on that. So is that a major impact on, like, I presume that interest is still revenue, right?
That's
Yeah.
correct.
And even if it's in a reserve, it's still revenue for the general budget or no?
Not in all cases. In some cases, the reserve requires the interest to be allocated to it. So the interest on the reserve gets allocated to the reserve. And some of it depends on what the original funding source was. So for some of the government grants that we received that were required to put into a reserve until we spend them, they also require the interest to go into the reserve. Not all of them though. So that when it doesn't require that, it goes to general operating. I think we're gonna see this number decrease pretty significantly this year and next year because of the water and sewer projects that are underway and the rebuilding.
Yeah.
But that's money that's sitting in our account right now, interest.
Yeah.
And we're gonna spend a lot of it.
That's
In the
what I was
next
thinking.
little while.
There's going to be some big payments coming out of a lot of those things. So then that's going to affect that interest.
That's right. And I imagine that historically, investment income was not a large revenue source for them,
No.
right?
Yeah,
It wouldn't have been a
I think it
major
existed
factor. It's just something
even,
we benefited from
Yeah.
having those funds in advance.
But it's also one of those things you got to remember when you're thinking about stuff like everything's going down and that includes the.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I was curious about our municipal insurance funds.
Okay.
So that was 7 million, I believe we collected,
We have not collected 7 million yet,
or
but
did we settled at 7 million or?
it's not all finished yet because some of it's related to assets that are being replaced. And
Right.
until they're replaced, it's not settled.
Okay, so is that where the village office comes out of?
Well, what we have
That
talked about is to use some of the funding that is available through insurance proceeds that's not required for a rebuild of something.
Yeah.
To use that money. Yeah.
So that's discretionary and could be put in a reserve if it wasn't.
It's in a reserve rate. It's in an
Right.
insurance reserve right now.
How much is it again?
I think it's just over 4 million at this time.
Thank you.
Any other questions, anybody?
I found this really actually easy to understand.
Yeah.
Something that's not a big strength of mine, so thank you.
Oh, good. Very straightforward as well. Or do we take questions off? If there's any community, we don't have anybody from community in the hall here, but maybe there's somebody on, there's a couple of people online. Do they have any questions? See any hands going up?
No hands going up.
Uh,
I've also said they can put their questions in the chat and I can read them out, but I haven't had any uptake.
There's something.
There's something in the chat.
That's just me telling them.
Okay.
That's just me telling them.
There you
Oh,
go.
I see. Okay, yeah. All right. Yeah, no, nobody seems to be, they're just here to listen, I guess, and that's good.
So just in terms of the,
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, so just to clarify, if there are any comments or whatever,
yes.
how do they submit their information? Next slide, there we go.
So the budget input period is open March the 14th. And we encourage people just to email comments or questions to myself at cfo@lytton.ca.
Okay.
And I'll provide, when I provide the draft of the financial plan to council, I'll bring with it any comments or questions that have been received.
Perfect. All right. So I guess if there's no other questions or anything that will end our session. Great. Thank you.
Thanks.
There it is. Thank you. Cook's Gem. Good job.